So this one is the fifth Indigenous education session that we've hosted through the Center for Race and Culture. This one specifically is on the 60s Scoop. I'm very honored to have Sharon Gladue. She's a former professional consultant at the 60s Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta. I know she does have a new job title too. I'm sure she'll be able to share that with folks when she goes on with her presentation. But I'm just very, very honored, very grateful to have her with this specific session. I would consider her totally, in our communities, what we call knowledge keepers in that sense on this specific topic. I would consider her an expert even in that sense. When she gets into her story, it'll be one that's very important, I think, for people to hear. And it's one that obviously I cannot tell. It's her story, but it's one that I'm sure for any of us that are Indigenous attending here will hit home in certain ways in that regard. So just a reminder, these sessions, they are made possible by the Canadian Race Relations Foundation. Just to kind of start with today's session, for any of you, if this is your first time attending, my name is Joshua Morin. I am the Indigenous Education Specialist at the Center for Race and Culture, and currently my role has been facilitating these Indigenous education sessions that we've been able to offer for free for folks across, as I say, Canada in that sense, just because they have been virtual too. So to start with land acknowledgement, the Center for Race and Culture respectfully acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and within the Métis homeland, and that we live and work on the traditional homelands of Indigenous peoples of Canada. We honor the elders, past and present, who call this land home, and strive to understand our shared colonial history and work together towards a just future that includes and enriches all peoples. Of course, I have the map of Treaty 6 territory. This one comes from a website called native-land.ca. It's a really great website. If I travel to, say, Eastern Canada or even some parts in BC, this website could actually help me know what traditional territory that I'm on, and also too if there's treaties there, or if it's also what some may call unceded land. So it's a really great website just if you want to learn in that case on the traditional territory that you're on. Of course, here we are on Treaty 6 territory. I am situated right now on Muskogee-Wasagan and within the Métis homeland. So we're gonna, we welcome today Sharon Gladue. As mentioned, Sharon's a former professional consultant at the 60s Scoop, at the 60s Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta. And to get a little bit into her bio, if any of you are familiar with Sharon Gladue, is it âpahkowâyânaw? Is that how you'd pronounce yes. Okay, perfect. Was born in 1968 in Turtle Ford, Saskatchewan. A registered band member within the Thunderchild Cree First Nation with dual ties with Little Pine First Nation, which was her late father's, late David Baptist's reserve. Although Sharon was a Thunderchild band member, Sharon and her family were contently living in Little Pine First Nation when Saskatchewan Children's Services authorities apprehended the younger three sisters. And this time the year was 1972. In 1975, Sharon and one of her sisters was adopted out to a half German and half Scottish family on the outskirts of Saskatchewan. Displaced from her family, her roots, her language, her identity, her community, and the land she was belonged to, Sharon and her sisters became lost to a system infamously known as the 60s Scoop. Growing up with horrendous atrocities, Sharon left Saskatchewan and in 1989 came west to Edmonton, where she met her late husband, Carl Joseph Gladue. They married in 2000. Sharon had a son who passed away at 7 months and now has a beautiful daughter and 4 handsome sons who she protects ferociously. I love how that part's written there. Being a kind and compassionate individual, Sharon pursued an education in Indigenous social work and began working through grief and trauma by becoming employed with a grief and trauma specialist. Finally understanding how the abandonment issues and how the loss of her identity, her family, community, language, and her son has helped her become who she is today, which is a kind, compassionate individual and a leader in the 60s Scoop movement across Canada. Sharon strongly believes that she walks on Mother Earth to support others who have went through the 60s Scoop and to mentor those who were still impacted by the child welfare system. Sharon also believes that educating mainstream Canadians on the atrocities of the 60s Scoop will shed light on the historical factors that happened to the Indigenous peoples in Canada. Sharon dedicates her work to her children, her grandchildren, and all those who are affected by the child welfare system. And I think after that, I will now hand it over to Sharon Gladue. So I will just stop the share here and we can get into, Sharon's PowerPoint here.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure, and it's exciting to share my story. I always think that people are going to get tired of listening to me, but the more I share, the more I remember some of the situations and some of the events that unfolded as a wee child. So I want to thank everybody for attending as well too, and if you want, I can make this PowerPoint presentation available to those that are requesting it, and just give me a message to the chat, and I'll forward it once I get some emails. And so with that, I thank you again, once again, for attending the 60s Scoop speaker series. And with that, I'll begin. So what I've always considered myself is I've been a lifer of the child welfare system ever since I was apprehended. And I do believe the first time my sisters and I were apprehended were when I was 2 years old. And there's little remnants of that in my memory, very deeply, what happened in those homes. So life after the 60s Scoop, this is who I am now today. I do believe that there is life after the 60s Scoop and life after child welfare, but you just never forget. The work I carry on today, it's something that it resonates deeply through me. And so when I say life after the 60s Scoop, it's the work that I'm doing now, and that's educating not only mainstream Canadians, but our own people, even our own leadership in our back home in our communities don't understand the atrocities that 60s Scoop survivors face. So with that, this is the story of my 60s Scoop, life after the 60s Scoop. Okay. Now, why won't it turn? Okay, there we go. Okay, the 60s Scoop. During the 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, the Canadian policy forcibly removed an unknown number of Canada's Indigenous children who were then fostered and are adopted into non-Indigenous communities globally. These survivors have faced loss of identity, language, culture, families, communities, their inherent rights, and the land they once belonged to. These survivors to this day search for their families and their rightful place as Indigenous peoples in Canada. So the term the 60s Scoop was coined by Patrick Johnston in his 1983 report, The Native Children and the Child Welfare System. Patrick Johnston reported in a later article from one of his sources who was a Caucasian social worker from BC. She told him in a secluded meeting that 20 years earlier, during the height of the 60s Scoop, her and her colleagues would go into reservations in British Columbia and start literally scooping Indigenous children and placing them in white foster homes, only to find out later on that these children would become known as 60 Scoop survivors. It is an estimated 20,000 children, the Aboriginal children, were taken from their families and fostered or adopted out to primarily white middle-class families, some within Canada and some in the US or Western Europe. And we're going to come back to this later on in the presentation as well too. We do know that Sixties Scoop, the survivors, they went globally around the world. We are now hearing from survivors from even in Asia, as well as New Zealand, Australia, and some other countries that Wales as well too. Finland, we've heard some survivors from Finland as well too. So it is globally that they were apprehended and taken to these foreign countries. So my married name is Sharon Gladue. I've prior to my apprehension, I was given an Indian name, and it's Blue Thunder Woman, and in Cree it's âpahkowâyânaw. And so how that happened was prior to my final apprehension, and this is a story that my mom told me because I don't remember the ceremony, and I'm not sure why I blocked it out, but my mom was telling me that when we were small children, we went into Cuttknife, Saskatchewan with them. And anybody that knows where Little Pound Maker or Cuttknife is, there's an area in Cuttknife where there's there's a river, tiny stream, brook that runs through it. And in there's groves of trees, and that's where the Indigenous people used to go gather when they used to go shop. They'd meet there for lunch and just to chit chat. And I was there as a wee little girl, and I guess I was tossing crab apples over these trees. And my older cousin was throwing crab apples back at me, and I was dodging them. And one of the elders, who was a medicine man, saw me pick up a crab apple and throw it over top the bush and literally hitting my cousin right on top of the forehead and bounced off. And he laughed and he thought, well, you know what, this little girl is something special. I was jumping from rock to rock, and I was very carefree. My mom told me that he asked me to her to bring me to his ceremony within the next few days, and he gave me the Indian name Blue Thunder Woman, and apparently he saw that extra spark of energy in me. And so I've often wondered where I get this energy and this motivation and the determination and grit and will. And I do believe that is my Indian name, and it's suited well for me. So this is who I am. So I was born to Edith Paskimon, my mom on the left. It was such a fun day that day. I decided to she asked me to do her hair for her, to braid it, and I teased her, and I ended up putting her hair in piggy tails. So born to Edith Paskimon from Thunderchild First Nation, and my dad, David Baptiste, is registered in the Little Pine First Nation. Both my parents were residential and day school survivors. My mom was a homemaker, and my dad a hunter and a trapper. During that time, he was not allowed to go off the reserve to hunt. The Indian agents, there was still Indian agents when he was young and starting a family, and he ended up being barred from leaving the reserve to go hunting and trapping. And he was a well-known hunter and trapper back in the day. And all the everything that they faced leading up from residential schools to day schools and to not being able to go hunt and trap, but they could go into bars. So they turned to alcohol and ended up becoming wedged in the alcohol. And so that was the start of our apprehensions, was because of the alcohol abuse that they endured. And I don't blame my mom and dad one bit. It's, they had their own hauntings and dealt with it. They were very kind-hearted though. And even though they fought their own demons, they loved us unconditionally. And they passed their humor, wit, will, drive, and good looks down for generations to come. So I'm very happy that I chose these two as my parents prior to my birth. So these are my sisters, and so the one on the far left is Esther, and she's we're all affected by the child welfare system. Every one of us were apprehended. My mom in the middle there. I have two brothers as well too, and I just couldn't get pictures of them prior to starting my presentation. So I have Esther, my sister, and then I have my sister Paulette in the front. That's in the white shirt, and she was the one that was fostered and adopted along with me, and so we grew up together. And then there's me in the middle, in the back, my mom in the front in the middle. My younger sister Davina is in the back on the far right, and she's my younger sister. So there was 3 of us that were apprehended together. The other ones were apprehended prior to us, and so it was a shock for my mom to come home, and that's a story in itself as well too. When we were apprehended, and I'll mention that further down the presentation. So my sister Hilda on the far right. So we're all 60 Scoop survivors, and Hilda grew up in Regina. Davina grew up in Waldheim. Paulette and I grew up in Delisle, and Esther grew up in North Battleford area. So these are my siblings, my Baptiste side. This is my dad's side of the family. And so I know there's there's a lot of people there. I couldn't find a picture with all my brothers in there at once. So the one on the top left is the closest that I could get for siblings, for my brothers. I do have some of my nephews in there as well too. I have 4 sisters, the bottom picture there. The 2 on the bottom left have passed on. My late sister, Velma, who was a university professor at the University of Saskatoon. And then my late sister, Vi, and she worked for Indian Ordinary Affairs Canada for a number of years. And then there's Noreen, Perline, Paulette, myself, and my younger sister, Davina. I have brothers, late Gio, he passed on a year ago, about 2 days ago, a year ago. And then Clarence, and then I have a late Harvey, late Bernard, and we lost those 2 just we lost late Harvey very recently. Late Bernard we lost about 10 years ago. And then I have my other brothers, Elvis and Leon. I should also mention that my family, we're all very well educated. And we all come from all types of backgrounds. We're social workers, educators, teachers, professors, doctors, dentists, certified cooks, healthcare aides, and we even have 1 paramedic in the family. So our parents, my mom is very proud of us, and I'm pretty sure my dad would have been pretty proud of us as well too, had he lived on further. So this is my adopted side of the family, and the reason why I'm showing you my family is because all the slides will have it'll point something in that direction later on in the presentation. So this is my Zorb family. They're my adopted family. We were adopted in 1975, and we were fostered in that family for 1 year prior to them the adoption becoming finalized. And I don't remember any celebration of any kind when we were adopted. And it was on a farm 35 kilometers southwest of Saskatoon. Our dad, Les Zorb, he was a kind and gentle soul. We rarely saw him because he worked in the potash mine. And so it was the only time we saw him was on weekends or first thing in the morning when he'd, sometimes he would send us off to school. But during the day, he was always gone. So he never saw what happened, during later on in those days. My adopted mother, rest her soul, Margaret Zorb, I'm not sure what demons she was facing. She was very quick, strict, and very quick with the belt. And we had 7 older brothers and 1 older adopted sister. It was hard growing up in Delisle. There was no unconditional love, except for my dad when he was home on weekends, and he protected us as well too from the ramifications from our adopted mother. And the racism flowed heavily like syrup in that town. And growing up in in an all-white Caucasian town, it was horrendous. Hearing the powwow jokes and the war cries and like Kimosabi, or they'd come up and say how. And so I don't know, I don't understand why they would just pick on us, but there would be Asians and they'd be East Indians in that school, but they wouldn't pick on them. They would just pick on my sister and I. So I knew that, I wasn't, my roots weren't going to be planted there. I knew that eventually that I would have to get up and fight, run, save myself. And eventually I did. And so we were on a farm outside of Saskatoon, and it was harsh. Sometimes in the winter times, we were forced to work. My parents said that, all the kids are working, you should too. And we used to always say, like, well, why did you adopt us? Did you adopt us just to work? And a few times my adopted mother would say, yes, we adopted you, not only one, but two of you, because I needed help on the farm. And we didn't know until about 2 years after we were adopted that she had multiple sclerosis, and she had 7 boys, plus a farm to take care of. And so it was no better opportunity to adopt not one, but 2 Native girls. And we learned to do a lot of things, but we would have been more appreciative and more understanding if we were given unconditional love, but we weren't. So, and hence that's why I became a runner. I remember standing up, like we were in a farmhouse, 2-story farmhouse, and our bedroom, my sister and I, we had our own, shared a bedroom. And I remember looking out the window facing west. And as a little girl, 6, 7 years old, just homesick for the family, I would just stand there and look west and just cry my little eyes out. And I knew one day that I was going to go home and find where Little Pine was. I was 8 years old when 9 years old when I first started contemplating suicide. It was in that home. And the one day I knew that I was going to hang myself from, well, I attempted suicide. I was going to hang myself from the closet rod, the clothing rod. And I told my sister that's what I was going to do. And she went and told my adopted brothers, and they came and they put a stop to that. But it wasn't like they didn't try and comfort me, by no means. It was like, how stupid are you? Mom and dad gave you a roof over your head. And when it wasn't that, they couldn't understand that it was not because of just the surroundings. It was because we missed our family, we missed the love, and we were children. And so there was a lot to that home as well too. And that's why I became a runner when I was about 13, 14 years old. I just started running. First chance I got on the highway, hitchhiking, I used to scrounge up enough just to get on the bus and on the Greyhound bus, or I would hitch rides into the city, and I would become lost in the city. And I learned how to maneuver my way around. I became a street-wise person very, very quickly. So the government of Canada, and this is where the Sixties Scoop is more of a defined as to what happened to the survivors. We really don't know exactly what happened leading up to the how the government portrayed this and changed it in the Indian Act. All we know that it was changed in 1951. So the Canadian government at the time, the Prime Minister at the time was John G. Diefenbaker. And what did he do? He amended the Indian Act, Section 88, in order to allow the provincial child welfare authorities to enter First Nations to begin the removal of the Indigenous First Nations children. Back in that day, the federal government were getting reports of children that were being neglected in their homes. Alcohol being run rampant ever since the bars were, the Indigenous people were allowed to enter bars. And so, because of the height of the residential schools, our parents, we can't really blame them. Our grandparents, they came with horrendous atrocities from the residential schools, and not knowing how to parent their own children, because they weren't parented properly as well too. So no fault of their own as well. And so what the Canadian government did was they offloaded their responsibility to provide fiduciary care to First Nations children. And so they offloaded it to the provincial child welfare systems in 1951. And so where it happened was everywhere across Canada on First Nations lands. And so Saskatchewan and Manitoba were the heaviest impacted by the 60s scoop as well. So why did this happen? For various reasons, and we all know, the residential schools had a huge play in it, and it was now they consider the child welfare system is the latest version of the residential schools. And also the Indian Act, and I further mentioned about my dad wasn't allowed to hunt and trap, go out and hunt and trap, and so he turned to the bottle. And also, while when I was taking my Indigenous social work, wonderful program. Oh, we learned so much in there. And one of the things that we learned was that the resources in the land, it heavily portrayed on our people, and the government wanted it. And so I'll just give you a really quick story. It's kind of like it backfired on them, but my reserve, Thunderchild, Saskatchewan, used to sit right on Highway 16, Yellowhead Highway, in between Lloydminster and Maidstone. And the CP Rail wanted to come in and build a railway. So the Indian agent at the time conspired with the CN Rail and the CP Rail, and they got one of our band members inebriated, and they made him sign with an X on the dotted line. And so they what they did was they rounded up our people when our men were out hunting and trapping. They took our people, and this was back in the late 1800s. And they dug up our coffins in our graveyards, and they moved everything to 70 kilometers northwest of where Thunderchild originally sat. So they took us off rich, fertile farmland because they wanted to expand for farmland as well as the CP rail. And they put us on a large pool of natural gas and oil. So it did backfire, but then later on, what they did was they turned around and changed in the Indian Act where anything 6 inches below the surface of the land was theirs, and anything below that was ours, the Indigenous people. So, but they changed that in one of the Indian Act amendments, and so they turned it around where the Indigenous people get 6 inches below the land, and then anything below that they get. So hence, kill the Indian for the resources in the land. And like if I hadn't taken that in Indigenous social work, I never would have believed that myself. So this is the infamous Adopt an Indian Métis program, and it's called AIM. I was a part of this horrendous child apprehension placing into middle-class homes procedure. The child removal system funded by the Federal Department of Health and Welfare on April 1st, 1967. Premier Ross Thatcher's Saskatchewan government launched its Adopt an Indian and Métis AIM program. This project was intended to remove many Indigenous children from their respective families and place them in non-Indigenous environments. And so you see the news article on the right, safe in your hands, out of nowhere into here. And some of the reports that we're getting from the captions on some of the children's that were put up for adoption through newspapers, the reports would be saying like unwanted child. And it made the public think that our parents didn't want us, which, that was fabricated just to sell the child. And so here is my child welfare mugshot. This is the picture where I was told to go and sit on this. It was like a horse, like a gymnastics horse, and they would place us. And I remember I would see other Native children there coming with other people, and I didn't know what was going on. And so they just told us to, place us there, and they said, sit and smile. And so we smiled as best as we could, and they snapped a picture. We didn't know what it was for. And my picture went into the Saskatoon Star Phoenix. And that's where my adopted parents, Margaret and Lesor, seen our pictures, mine and my sister Paulette, and decided to reach out and see if they could adopt us. And so that's how we were adopted out, was through the the Saskatoon Star Phoenix through the AIM program. So this slide, it bites. Oh, I was mad. I was very upset when I found this out. So through the AIM project, on the article on the left, you will see that the Doreen Wilson, the supervisor for North Battleford Children's Services, was awarded Salesman of the Year in recognition of your memo on September 21st, 1973, pushing your region's permanent wards who haven't been admitted yet. You have been unanimously nominated by the AIM Centre staff for the Salesperson of the Year award, which will be presented in due course and appropriate circumstances. In addition, your children, of course, will be entered for selection at the bottom of the list, like all others subsequent to committal, and we will wait to receive further news of children who may appear suspiciously adoptable. Yeah, the word suspiciously. Huh. So, and then you'll see on the one on the right is my memo for permanent wardship, and whose name is on the top there is Doreen Wilson, Supervisor, North Battleford Children's Services. Yeah, I was when I first seen this memo, I was on Facebook, and I had received my child welfare record back in 2018, and I thought I read Doreen Wilson's name somewhere, and sure enough, when I went back and to look into my permanent wardship file, there it was, in large letters, Mrs. Doreen Wilson, who became Salesman of the Year for apprehending as many Indigenous children in Saskatchewan and placing them with AIM so they were able to be adopted out and lost into the system. So, yeah, it's quite shocking. I wonder what the social workers would be thinking about this practice in this day and age. So after some time of coming to Edmonton here, I was a wounded individual when I came. I basically ran away from Saskatchewan. I didn't feel that there was anything there for me. When I arrived, my son on the top right there, the little guy, the baby, I had him when I was 17, and I turned 18. I had him September 18th, 1986, and I turned 18 on the month later. And within 7 months' time, I was burying my son. And I didn't know that, I didn't know anything about pericarditis meningitis, or I didn't know anything about the common cold, really. And I took him outside, and I thought I had dressed him up, and I blamed myself for years, and he got sick. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I took him outside, and I laid him down for his nap Tuesday afternoon. And by Tuesday, when he woke up in the evening, he was sick, fevered and whatnot, and he wouldn't sleep all night. And then Wednesday morning, I went and took him into the hospital, and the doctors admitted him. And because I couldn't sleep that night before, I was so exhausted. By the time I got home, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had left my son. And the last memory I remember seeing him was when I went and looked at him in his crib, and he was still crying, and we couldn't figure out why. He was just constantly crying. And I had given him a little tiny teddy bear, and even though he was hurt and in pain, he picked up that little tiny teddy bear, and he was still trying to play with it. And that was the last time I saw him. And he passed away 10 o'clock that night. I got up at about 10 o'clock, and I knew that my son was in the hospital, and I wanted to know, find out about him. So I called the hospital. The nurses, they said, Sharon, is there any way you can get into the hospital here? And I said, no, not right at this point. I don't. And 10 minutes later, the doctor came on the line, and I was starting to get really worried. And she says, there's no way you can come into town. I said, no, there isn't. I have no way to get in. And she says, well, unfortunately, I have to inform you that your son passed away 10 minutes ago. And I don't remember anything after that. I don't remember, like, I remember bits and pieces. I remember the elders getting there. I remember waking up that next morning and the doctor wanting to talk to me on the phone. They had already done his autopsy, apparently, and he had pericarditis meningitis. And it's meningitis went into his heart, and apparently when they opened up his heart, he had a huge heart for a little boy. And so to me, he was given to me for a very short period of time to find out, how I can love children even more. And so he was a learning lesson for me, for sure. He's my heavenly angel. And at the time I wasn't given any faith. I didn't know anything about grief, trauma. I didn't know nothing about Christianity, God. Like, I knew there was a God. And I knew that there was also a devil, because it was instilled in us. And so I used to say, like, Creator God, please, I need to know that, he's where my son is. And so on the day of that we buried him, it was a day fit for a funeral, and it was rainy and cloudy. And when we went to go lower his casket into the grave, and the sun broke out of the clouds, and just like on that movie Ghosts, where you see the dust clouds coming down and filtering through the air, that's what I saw. And it was just directly right on his casket. And just quicker than lightning, then the clouds came over, and the sunbeam took off, left. And so I know Creator has my son. And I'm gonna talk about further down the line with my grief and trauma that I took. So but anyways, the rest of my bear cubs, who I love fiercely and ferociously, is my daughter Angel on the bottom right. And I'm going to be another proud Kukum with another new grandchild, and she's expecting in July. And then I have a son, David, there to her left, and he's my 28-year-old. I have 4 beautiful, beautiful grand boys from him, and just an absolute joy. And then my son, Danelle, he used to be called Fussy when he was a little boy. And I have one beautiful granddaughter from him, and he lives in Saskatchewan in Muskeg Lake. And then I have my 2 younger boys on the 2 pictures on the left, Josiah and my son, Jodea. All my children are huge. They're my daughter's 6 feet tall. My son's David is about 6'3", Danelle's 6'2", and the one Josiah 6'8", and the other one is 6'4". So they're pretty big boys and really tall girl, and I'm pretty proud of them. And I just absolute joy every time I always have to hear from them once a day, or at least one of them, to make my heart even, to be able to find some joy in that day. And I do believe, and wholeheartedly, that is because of my abandonment issues as well too. So I'm going to go into my sister. I call her my hero, and this is Hilda Paskman. And so Hilda, she was the one that was raised in Regina, and she's a 60 Scoop survivor. So when my sister Paulette and I, we were the ones that were adopted together. When she turned 18, I was 17. We found out that we were treaty status, and that we were able to apply for our treaty status cards. And so what happened was, our older sister Hilda was looking for us, and she had graduated and went, and she was talking to my biological dad's side of the family, and one of my sisters, Velma, who worked for Indian Northern Affairs Canada, hired her to be a registration clerk. So that, I had both sisters working in that system. And lo and behold, Hilda decided to work there because she knew that one day we would apply for our status cards, and anybody applying for their status cards would have to go through her in the North Battleford area. And so when Paulette turned 18 and I turned 17, we went into Saskatoon and we filed for our status cards. And about 2 months later, we get this phone call, and here it's Hilda. And so what happened was she received our applications and she recognized our names and our birth dates, and she went into the back, and all status individuals are in the old school days, they're listed in these big huge black books. And so she had to go and cross-reference, and sure enough, there we were, larger than life. And that's how she found us, was she was a registration clerk. And so that's how we were reunited with our family, and we never looked back after that. And so I call her my hero. She's a traditional dancer, and she's just got such a beautiful soul about her. And she's she's a pipe carrier now as well too. And I just love her. She's come a long ways from being a 60 Scoop survivor to who she is now, which is she's a teacher in Frog Lake School. And it's also a world-renowned traditional dancer as well too. Those are my other sisters who we were, there was 5 of us, my mom's side. This is a very rare photo of us when we were small. I'm in the center there in the middle, but hiding behind my younger sister, Davina. I don't know why I'm always hiding or in the middle. But yeah, there's Hilda, Esther, Davina, Paulette, and then myself in the middle. And I do believe that's the only picture that we have of us when we were small. So I cherish that picture quite well. So back in 2017, I was invited along with 12 other 60 Scoop survivors to travel to Ottawa to go share their 60 Scoop stories. And this is called the âpahkowâyânaw Truth Telling from the 60 Scoop. And so there was 12 of us from across Canada, or actually 11. One was from New Zealand, 60 Scoop survivor who was originally from Manitoba, who was apprehended and placed in New Zealand. So the government did their best to displace us around the world, and they did a pretty good job. But everything always comes back into a full circle. And we were growing up displaced, hurt, looking, searching, and nobody would believe the way we grew up. We grew up different from residential school survivors because when we were placed in foster homes, we were placed in rural areas, and sometimes just by ourselves, and not even seeing another Indigenous person for years. And I remember telling my adopted mother, telling her, like, I don't see other Indigenous people, and we want to see some. Can we see some, go and see some Indigenous people? And so she made my dad, when we were going into the city, she made my dad go drive down 20th Street in Saskatoon, which was Skid Row, and all of the homeless people, the addicted, they were just walking around, and my mom would just point out, said, "See, there's your people there. Are you happy? You saw your people." And that sense of shame it just floored me, and I just wanted to crawl back inside myself. And so for years I was always ashamed about the color of my skin and who I was. And so it took a lot of healing. It took a lot of self-talk and mentors as well to come out of that. But I'll explain that further down the line here. So the Truth Telling from the 60 Scoop story by âpahkowâyânaw, the original exhibit is forever archived at the Ottawa Museum. And there's 4 traveling exhibits that go across Canada, and my story's on there. You can Google the âpahkowâyânaw Truth Telling from the 60 Scoop, and I have 1 hour. I share my story for 1 hour on that website as well too. You will see that my pictures there. I'm standing right beside my pictures. Myself and my older sister Paulette. I always include her with my 60 Scoop story because we share the same atrocities, her and I. So after I went to Ottawa, I met a Blackfoot man, and he was a survivor. And so we came back and we decided that something has to be done in Western Canada on the atrocities of the 60 Scoop. So we began, we started up the 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta, and I became a professional consultant / vice president of SSISA. And so what we did was we wanted an apology from the Alberta government. Even though I was a Saskatchewan Scoopy, I am a Treaty 6 band member. And so we had quite a lengthy discussion with some of the leadership, and you know, they told us, rest assured, Sharon, you know, Treaty 6 was here long before the provinces were, so you're okay. And so I just dove, you know, head first into the work here. And so the picture on the left here was after the May 28th historical day, where former premier at the time, Rachel Notley, apologized to 60 Scoop survivors. And it was a very heartfelt apology. And how we did that was when we approached the Alberta government, and you know, they really don't listen unless it's very impacted, or they have to listen to the opposition party. And so that's what we did. We went to the opposition party at the time, which was Wild Rose, and who have now partnered up with the UCP. And we approached the Wild Rose, and we informed them what we wanted and how we grew up. And so we were invited to attend sit inside the Alberta Chambers on Budget Day. And we were told to invite as many 60 Scoop survivors, because at the time, Dave Hansen, who was the MLA for St. Paul region, that's who we approached to get us on the floor. And so he introduced, there was about 24 of us 60 Scoop survivors who went into the ledge and sat in there during Budget Day. And it was well targeted because the news was there, the television, because it was Budget Day. And so he introduced us on the and in chambers. And if anybody has ever been in the ledge when something comes up, which is when they all thrive on it, you can hear them pounding on the desk, and that sound reverberated throughout the ledge when they introduced us. And so it was that day when Premier Rachel Notley stood up in chambers and said, yes, there is going to be an apology coming, but we want to hear from the survivors. And so we started, that's where our work began. They appointed a department within Children's Services and Indigenous Relations to work with us. And so we formed a board of directors, and we came up with the name 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta. We came up with all sorts of names, and the acronyms didn't fit. One was like ASS, and then the other one was it was just like gang names. And I was like, no, we have to find something where we can use the acronyms and that we're able to identify who we are. And so this name 60 Scoop Indigenous Society, SSISA, came along. So we became incorporated in I do believe it was April 18th, 2017. And we had this board meeting, and I told Adam, you know, like, you need to go and get us incorporated. And he took all the paperwork and the motions and the fee, and went into the Alberta registries, and they took everything, and they said, okay, well, you should be getting your papers within 4 to 5 months down the road. And he says, 4 to 5 months, we can't wait. We need it like today. And he called me up, and he was frantic. And I said, well, we're already working with the Minister of Indigenous Relations and the Minister of Children's Services. So why don't you call one of them up and see what they can do? And lo and behold, Adam got a phone call later that day and said, Mr. Adam North-Pagan, your incorporated documents came in. You can please come and pick them up. So we were incorporated that day. And like we say, where there's a will, there's a way. So we've done a lot of work. You know, we traveled across Alberta. We put 6 engagement sessions together, and since none of the board members had any social work background, and I did, and I had facilitation skills, and we knew that the government wanted to listen to these survivors share their stories, and we know that 10 survivors could make up one day. And so we ended up telling them, like, no, we can't have 10 sharing circles. And so what we did was we hired facilitators, and we just started breaking into smaller sharing circles. And the first one that we had was in Peace River, and it was like -38, and it was freezing. And so we had a very low turnout. I think we had like about 13 Sixties Scoop survivors and 2 sharing circles. And then 2 months later, it gained momentum, and we went to St. Paul, we went to Fort McMurray, Lethbridge, Calgary, and Edmonton. And at each engagement session, we open each engagement session up with a pipe ceremony. And I remember when we had the pipe ceremony in St. Paul, and we asked my late uncle Eugene Cardinal to be our elder there, and I remember his words when he prayed, and he said he prayed for the 60 Scoop movement to go across Canada like wildfire, and it did. And so by the time we got to Edmonton, we had 17 sharing circles and over 500 60 Scoop survivors. And we were so impressed and just so ecstatic when this individual came up to us, and he was a CO, a correctional officer based out of one of the I think it was down in Calgary. And he came up for the session, and he had over 200 filled out forms for because there was questions like, how has a 60 Scoop impacted you? If you hear an apology, what does that mean to you? What does the words "I'm sorry" mean to you? And what do you want to see coming out of an apology? And so he, out of his own will and time, went out and interviewed our incarcerated 60 Scoop brothers and sisters, and came back with a stack of them and handed them into us. And so, you know, we can't forget about our incarcerated 60 Scoop survivors that are incarcerated, because of the fact that that's why they're in there, is the atrocities that they faced. So another thing that we did, like, we did a lot of events as well too. And we know that 60 Scoop survivors, nobody will ever get the gist of our stories unless we talk to another survivor. And so it's really good for us to have gatherings. And so that's why we started putting events together. And the first Western Canada 60 Scoop gathering was held in Manitou Beach and Manitou Lake in Saskatchewan, and that's healing waters there. And it was a really good turnout, and wow, very, very well put together. And so we're hoping that, you know, more gatherings can pop up across the country, because it's surely needed for us 60 Scoop survivors. So when we traveled around Alberta, we were talking about like how we wanted to know how a 60 Scoop impacted you. And so these are the atrocities that the majority of the survivors inputted, and abandonment issues. We'll forever have abandonment issues until we walk into the spirit world. We have the loss of language, culture, identity, and family. A high rate of addictions and homelessness. High rate of suicidal ideations and attempts. And sadly, a lot of our survivors now walk in the spirit world. We lost our inherent rights, such as treaty entitlement, loss of that sense of belonging to the land that they were once a part of. And I want to bring that up. An elder had told a few of us survivors, because every time we leave our place, we just long for it. And like one of our survivors left the country, and she went down to the States for a bit of time, and then she had to come back, but she could not wait to get back home. And we started talking about that, and the elder said that it's not that you're missing home, it's the land is calling you back. And those words resonated through me. So it really makes sense when she said that we lost that sense, the land that we were once a part of. The sense of loss, searching for a place in this world. And I remember that I had to make my own place to find, and my own home, so I would have my own to come home to, my own family and whatnot. And I made a promise to myself when I was younger, that if I can't have it, then I'll make it my own. And so that's what I've been doing, is making that sense of loss as what can I replace with that loss. And so I've been doing a lot of ceremony. I've been doing a lot of reaching out to elders, and a lot of conversations through support groups as well. You know, you can never ever get too much of ceremony. You can never ever get too much of power of prayer and that type of living as well too. So the sense of shame of color, of skin, heritage, and ceremony. And I remember the first time coming back, and I saw my mom smudging, and I was so ashamed, and like, what is that, so heathen like? And so now I feel so bad for thinking that way, but I didn't know any better. The color of my skin, you know, and as a child in the elementary school in Delisle, like I was always sent back into the bathroom to go wash my elbows and my knees, and the teacher not realizing that's actually the color of my skin. And so I was always centered out from the teachers as well too. You know, I don't know, because the color of my skin, I look dirty or whatnot, but so yeah, the color of my skin, I grew up with shame about that, and you know, ashamed about being Indigenous, and so there was a lot of work I had to do in that area. So over the course of since 2015, the height of the 60s Scoop coming into the light of into Canada, there has been 3 60s Scoop apologies, and the first one was in June 18, 2015, when at the time Manitoba former Premier Greg Sullinger apologized to the Manitoba 60 Scoop survivors. And it was over one weekend, and they had 3 families come in, and he was talking to them, and that's how the apology rolled out. And then May 28, 2018, of course, I had a huge hand in that, and it was recorded on Hansard and in chambers. So it was an official formal apology. January 7, 2019, I did go down to Regina to attend that. It was a bit of a disappointment, I can tell you that. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe apologized in the lobby to us 60 Scoop survivors, not in chambers or not on Hansard. So, and the work was done. They weren't, that apology was led by the 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Saskatchewan, SSISA. And so it's just a different population, different type of government over there at the time. We were working with NDP, they were working with the PCs, and so if we tried to get an apology out of Jason Kenney today, I don't think it would. I think it would probably be like Premier Scott Moe. So a federal apology will be forthcoming once all class action settlements have been settled, which is the Métis and the non-status. When we did do the apology, there was a gift giving with Premier Rachel Notley at the time. We had given her a very, it was a beautiful painting, and she gifted us with this plaque, and it states, "In the spirit of reconciliation, the government of Alberta recognizes the 60 Scoop and Indigenous Society of Alberta for your commitment, perseverance, and leadership to the well-being of Indigenous peoples. Honorable Rachel Notley, Premier of Alberta, May 28th, 2018. That was quite the day. So the federal 60 Scoop class action lawsuit, and it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it now. Marcia Martel Brown Martel was the lead plaintiff in this, and what happened was she was apprehended and taken down into the States, and she knew that she had seen some documents in her parents' files later on in her life, and realized that she wasn't even a U.S. citizen; she was actually a Canadian. So when she was an adult, she made her way back to Canada, and she wanted to change her last name back to her original last name, only to be told that there was a death certificate on file for her. And so the Canadian government declared her legally dead. And so that's why she came back, and she filed a class action lawsuit against the government of Canada. At the time, it was supposed to be for the Ontario government, and it took that many years to build a class action lawsuit. And so we were privy, the SSISA board was privy to be able to sit down and meet with the lawyers, the judge, and the lead plaintiffs. The lead plaintiffs were over the phone. The lawyers and the judge, they flew out to Edmonton to meet with us. And so what we found out was, we asked them, and we wanted to know the truth. We wanted to know how many Indigenous children were actually apprehended And so what the lawyer there was saying, well, back in 2009, we knew that there would be an exorbitant amount of survivors, and we need to hire some actuaries to find out and to research how many were actually apprehended. And the number that they came back was 130,000 children were apprehended. And this was status treaty children across Canada. And sadly, there's only less than 20,000 of us left. And that's part of the class action lawsuit was, it states in there 25,000 survivors. In the news, it states 20,000. And in reality, there was over 130,000. And sadly, there's 100,000 of us gone now. And we're basically, and I hate to say it, but a lot of our survivors are dropping like flies. And so we're hoping that we can get a federal apology prior to any more of our survivors leaving us. So what Marcia Brown did, she became a chief in her own community, and she filed for loss of culture, language, and identity, and she won. And in 2017, and I remember the day, February 14th, because it was Valentine's Day, and it was such an emotional day for all 60 Scoop survivors across Canada, and we were waiting on pins and needles about this on the news. And Ontario Superior Court Judge Bellaboba found Canada guilty for not providing fiduciary or common law duty of care to take reasonable steps to protect the Indigenous identity of the class members. And so that day forward, we had to wait. We had to wait until September of 2018 to file, and we are still waiting. We, as a vice president and professional consultant, former professional consultant of SSISA, we felt the need that we had to step up to the plate and ask them for at least some sort of a payout because of the COVID as well. And they hired a consulting team to disperse the money. And it's 2018 and it is now 2022 next year in about a month. And we're still waiting for the second payout. And the second payout will probably be only about 4,000. We got 21,000 last year, the majority of us. From my understanding, they still have to go over about 4,000 applications to either decline or accept them. And they still have to go through another 4,000 for waiting for more information to either clarify those ones accepted or declined in the class action lawsuit. And that is only for loss of culture, language, and identity. So the provincial class action lawsuits are forthcoming for pain and suffering. And each province has a class action lawsuit in the courts waiting for certification. Saskatchewan was the very first one to win a certification, and so they're setting precedents for that. So, yeah, the provincial class action lawsuits for pain and suffering are coming. 60s Scoop Healing Foundation, and so part of the settlement, the federal settlement, was that there had to have been, and this was Marcia Brown's wish, was that there had to be a healing foundation in some sort to begin the healing process. And so those affected by the 60s Scoop identity, the loss of culture and language as among the greatest harm they suffered. Which is why the government is responding directly to address this underlying impact of misguided past policies. And as part of the proposed settlement, the government has committed to spending $50 million to help launch the foundation. And I know that's not very much, but the 10 60s Scoop survivor board members and the one CEO have committed to launching a proposal, I guess, workshops, and addressing that more money needs to be flow through the Healing Foundation. It's different than the residential school, and so 50 million is nothing compared to what we really need in our, like we said, because of the losses that we had. The structure of the foundation is held by 10 60 Scoop survivor board members and one CEO. And they're right now they're based out of Ottawa, but I do believe they are looking for a head office somewhere around across Canada. It doesn't have to be in Ottawa. So there is a website as well too for that. And then, so this is Reflections from the 60s Scoop, and this is my creation. I had created this this exercise in regards to an anti-racism campaign that was going through across non-Indigenous or non-profit organizations. There was a call out for RFPs, and so I decided, well, I want to look at this, and I being a like, I love libraries. That's where I used to go hide in the towns where I was fostered out into, and I was very comfortable in those libraries. And so when I moved to Devon, that's exactly what I did. Was I went and I made myself known in a local library, and I started asking the director, like, what are you guys doing for Truth and Reconciliation? And I'm always the pusher for that. And so she says, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to approach Enoch. And I said, well, how about this? And so I explained who I was, and I basically fell in her lap. And so I applied for the 25,000, and we got it. And so I met with the Municipal Public Library Services branch, and we selected 12 local libraries across Alberta, or actually very rural libraries across Alberta, where I was going to go deliver this exercise. I went and I called out for 12 Sixties Scoop survivors across Canada, and they came. I never changed the stories. All I did was I add punctuation and move the sentences around where I can actually, so they're paragraph. And my idea was I was going to get non-Indigenous people to read these stories. And how I was going to do that was I went and I bought a white tarp out of Canadian Tire, and I drew the map of Canada on it. We traveled to these 13 rural libraries, and we delivered the exercise in the afternoons. The morning was a PowerPoint presentations on educating them on the 60 Scoop. The second part was educating them through the heart. And so I would lay this tarp down, and there would be, I would call mayors, I would call council members, RCMP, doctors, clinicians, educators, social workers in those communities to come to this event. And there was a lot that did. And so I would hand these stories out to these non-Indigenous people and mainstream Canadians. And the start of it would be, I always had these late Richard Cardinal story. I started off with him, and it would be, my name is Richard Cardinal. I was born in Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, and I was taken at an age of 5 and apprehended and placed in Edmonton. So that reader would have to move himself from Fort Chip on the map down to where Edmonton is on the map. And so they would be moving around the map every time it states in the story where they were placed. And so it shows clearly the disparity that we faced as 60 Scoop survivors. And I can tell you, by the end of the day, there was not a dry eye in the room, because we shared those stories, and they held nothing back. And so at the end of the exercise, I would do a final sharing circle, and just to reflect and to make sure that, you know, they would be going home in a good way. And so it was a really good exercise. I put a call out for support letters, and we got 17 support letters, ranging from RCMP to Camrose City Police to the mayor of Calgary, to all sorts of support letters indicating that I should take this across Canada. And then COVID hit. So we had to just kind of like rein it down. And so unfortunately I left that organization, and this is the exercise that we had patented. I created it. I considered mine still, and unfortunately I had to leave with that organization. So if anybody knows how to, well, what can be done so I can have it back. I feel like Buffy St. Marie when she sold her one song off. I can't remember what it was, but that's how I feel about this exercise. It's something I created. And my healing journey. So I've, over the course of time, I managed to go get myself an education. I had to. I couldn't sit and watch my children live in neglect, and I couldn't live on welfare anymore, on poverty, and you know, like I have stories, usually for every point, but I know we're limited on time, and I plan on writing a book. So eventually, maybe you'll read the book. But like education, I do believe education is the way out of depression and oppression. And so I started finding ways where I can actually soak up knowledge the way I can retain knowledge, which was the Indigenous way. And so every time I went for an Indigenous went back to school, it was always an Indigenous training. The university, the college entrance program at Concordia College, and it was all Aboriginal based. There was 32 Indigenous people. Native Communications out of Grant MacEwan College. Office Administration, that was out of Campbell College. My grief and trauma training through Dr. Jane Symington. And then finally, my Aboriginal Child and Family Services social work program based out of Yellowhead Tribal College and Keano College. I've had strong mentorship as well too. Dr. James Battle, who was my psychologist for years, he's actually the one that picked me up, dusted me off, and set me on my path. And I'll forever be grateful to him for that. Dr. Jane Symington, she's the one that got my heart and my soul on how to open up to ceremony. And so I was I was very grateful for the work that she made. She asked me to take. And so I'll always carry those on, my grief and trauma training with me. And so eventually that's the area that I will be getting into later on in life. And of course, I can't forget about my faith, my faith in Creator. I smudge and I pray every day. I go out to a place, a lookout point here in Devon, and I go put tobacco down. I love nature, and that's just who I am. But the biggest factor in my life moving forward is Creator. And I don't know where I would be without him. And I owe everything to Creator. And I don't know. I don't know where I would be if I hadn't turned to Creator. My life after? No. I'm a proud cocoa to 6 beautiful grandchildren and 1 more on the way. That one's due in July. I am a volunteer board member for the Sixties Scoop Legacy of Canada. I just a couple of weeks ago, they reached out to me, and I willingly accepted. So I'm looking forward to starting to work with that as well too. I'm the Senior Administrative Assistant / Coordinator, and I forgot coordinator for the âpahkowâyânaw Community HR Solutions. And so this is where I'm bringing my grief and trauma. And so I'll be doing workshops, online workshops and training through First Nations communities across Canada. And so I'm very grateful. It's a 2-year, that organization's only been operating for 2 years, and they're growing. So I'm very, very excited to bring what I can to the table for them. I live in Devon, 3 kilometers southwest of Devon, with my dog Max and my cat Otis, and I had to kick them outside during this because they're right at my feet. I can't go to the washroom, or I can't even go to the fridge without them right behind me. So I still do this. I'm a strong Indigenous child welfare advocate in Alberta. That's one thing I've tried to get out of, but I can't. I've made myself such a name here that I have other people inboxing me at all hours of the night, telling me their stories of what happened when their children are apprehended and what they could do. So eventually I will be getting back into being an advocate, and I'm actively on my healing journey. And I will continuously, educate mainstream Canadians on the atrocities of the 60s Scoop. And so I'm hoping that you guys can maybe take a picture, or for those that want in the PowerPoint after the presentation, here are some of the some resources. CTV Primetime Understanding the 60s Scoop came out to Devon to interview me, and I have an 8-minute video about my story. And if you can Google that, CTV Primetime Understanding the 60s Scoop, you'll see that. May 28, 2018, Alberta 60s Scoop Apologies on YouTube. I do believe that one is 14 minutes in length, and I encourage you all to log on and watch it, because it's a really heartfelt apology. And another one that I find dear to is Finding Cleo podcast. Cleo Indigenous. She is my late cousin from Little Pine First Nation, and so Little Pine was hugely affected by the 60s Scoop, and so So I ask that you just turn to those resources, and if you have any questions, or you can always reach back out to me if we don't have any more time. But that's it with my presentation. Hi, thank you.
Wow, let me just say thank you so much, Sharon. I know from my end, I learned a lot just from this presentation, and I'm just very grateful for your openness and willingness to just share your story with us. For one, just here at the Center for Race and Culture, but for everyone here who attended this session today. I was reading comments throughout the session, and a lot of people were very touched by what you've shared today. And there are some questions for sure that we can definitely, I don't know if there's someone was actually asking if James S says, I worked in Edmonton as a child welfare worker, and I did work with Sharon, and just wondering if you're still working with the Creating Hope Society, or if there's an affiliation still between you two.
I am a co-founder of Creating Hope Society. Bernadette is one of my friends. At this point in time, not at this, I won't be going back to Creating Hope, but I've been asked if I can take over Creating Hope in within the next 2 or 3 years. And so at this short period of time, no, but in a long period of time, maybe.
Well, it's funny because my organization is located in the same building that Creating Hope, so we could be neighbors potentially in the future, Sharon. So
yes, we could.
I'm honestly, I'm looking forward to that in a sense. That's really cool. Joyce is asking, Sharon, how can we be allies for 60s Scoop? I imagine just whether it's the settlement or survivors, or just kind of in general. I imagine.
Well, you can read and educate yourself what's on the internet, and most times we do, when we ask for support through our allies, we want them to correct misinformed information. And I know there's a lot of misinformed information, and when we went and approached Jason Kenney about the 60s Scoop, he didn't even believe our stories. He was just like, well, why would that happen? Like, he just couldn't get it. And so I know there's a lot of misinformed, and I hate to use the word ignorant, but there are a lot out there. So if you can educate them, and my story is out there, there's thousands and thousands more stories coming out. And the one thing about the apologies is that the Canadian government, once they apologize, it doesn't mean that they're guilty. There's a clause in some sort of an act about that as well too. So they can apologize, meaning that they're not guilty of anything. So, line yourself up with any of the 60 Scoop organizations as well too. The National Healing Foundation, the 60 Scoop Legacy of Canada as well too. And the more work that those organizations will be doing, the more forthcoming, more information will be coming out as well too, more resources.
And Darcy, and I know Darcy, he was asking specifically if what if your mom gave you up for adoption willingly? That's how he worded it for that one. I don't know if he means how would someone move forward with that one, or yeah, that's just what he asked.
Okay. No, she didn't give us up willingly. She was in a hospital. She had mental health issues, and from my understanding, from what my dad was sharing with us, was that my mom was in the hospital when the children's services came. My dad was there with my youngest older brother. And I don't remember my brother being there, but I remember the final apprehension. And my dad, because back in the day, they would show up with police officers, and if you didn't hand over your children, you'd be arrested. And my dad didn't want to be arrested, and so he had no choice but to pack that suitcase. And when the children's services showed up at the door, he had no choice but to hand us over. But when that door closed and we drove off, my brother witnessed my dad for the first time and only time shed tears. He cried. And so I know my dad didn't want to, but back in the day, they had no choice. They had no choice at all.
Well, thank you so much. A lot of people are, yeah, they're saying thank you. Madison is saying, this is some amazing milestones that have been made, and just in regards with the settlement and just your folks, even personally, with your journey. Darcy did come back. Okay, it sounds like for him it was for his specific situation moving forward. And I think we could probably send Darcy for sure some great resources on 60 Scoop and organizations to reach out that could probably help with his specific situation. But I thank you, Darcy, for participating in this. I hope this has helped guided you in any way, but we can definitely send any resources. Colleen, may the creator continue to help you on your journey. Sharon, thank you for sharing with us today, and know that many of us support you 100%. So there's a lot of comments, that are very touched. They support you. For anyone who wants a copy, we can absolutely send you a copy of the PowerPoint. The nice part with the Eventbrite is it gives us the emails for those who registered, so we can definitely do that. Hazel shared, it just says Hazel iPad, but she shared something about they adopted someone from the 60 Scoop, and it wasn't until 1985 that they were able to get their status back. Sounds like after the Bill C 31. His bio sister was taken to the USA, and she came to see him. What a wonderful reunion. Well, that's good that they were able to get back and they had that beautiful reunion. Okay, I'm just gonna see if there's any. Darcy says thank you. Sharon Moore, my mom. Oh, there you go. She says many thanks, Sharon. Lisa M says miigwech from this settler in Toronto, sending much love and thank you for sharing your story with us. Oh, thank you for attending from all the way in Toronto. No, we're very honored that you from all the way over there and taking your time. So, thank you so much. I'll see if there's any. James, are there any job opportunities with your organization? I don't know if it's my organization, you can check the website for sure. There might be something popping up on the website, and I don't know if it's Creating Hope. I don't know if that was the organization you're referring to either, but I know on our website we definitely do have a job posting section for sure. Okay, so I just want to make sure I echo enough of the comments. People were saying too, sorry about the loss that you had with one of your children. A lot of people were touched on that one too. So they were saying sorry for that one. Deepest condolences. No, it looked like a lot of people were very appreciative. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it. Here we go. Someone was joining from, it's not a question, but they were joining from the Coast Salish territory. Wow. I don't know if I can pronounce your community's name properly, but no, thank you also, Teresa, for being here. Also, Teresa Berg. Okay, so I think that's it for questions. I think I've got most of the comments too. So I just want to thank, of course, Sharon myself in that sense for doing this session with the Center for Race and Culture, and of course, everyone for attending this fifth Indigenous education session with us. Of course, this session is recorded. Anyone, if you want to share it with anyone, they'll be able to watch it for sure. And also, if you came in late or you weren't able to stay for the whole thing, you will absolutely be able to watch this after. There are two of us from the traditional territories. Cool. How would you pronounce it? There has to be I'm interested in that. Okay, Suk Nation. Perfect. Marseille for that. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, Matthew, appreciate the webinar. So that's perfect. Okay. So I'll probably end it. We're going to be at the 2:30 mark here, but no, just Marseille for everyone for participating this session particularly, and thank you, of course, to Sharon also for spending her afternoon with us in that case. So I'll just say, hope everyone has a good rest of your day, take care, everyone, and look for the next session that we'll be doing for sure. We'll make sure to post it on our website and social medias and all that. So, Marseille.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.